I'm John Seaman here at Road America this fine fall morning. Today is October 5th, and here at Road America we're here for the Vintage Sports Car Driver Association and the Elkhart Lake Fall Festival, a vintage and historic racing car. I'm with John Clean, who is the president of the Vintage Sports Car Drivers Association.
Thank you, John. Well, basically, this weekend is a joint production of the Vintage Sports Car Drivers Association, which is based in Chicago, and the Vintage Sports Car Racing Incorporated from Minnesota. It's the first time our two clubs have gotten together, and we're basically interested in the restoration and preservation and operation of old race cars and sports cars. And we have certainly a rather magnificent turnout of such cars here this weekend, ranging from 1927 S-type Mercedes and Bugatti and Morgan up to Jaguars and Ferraris and Porsches, with just about everything in between from 27 to about 1972. We've got about 100 racing entries here. And basically, we're just very happy to be at this great race course, Elkhart Lake, the longest and probably the most famous race course in the United States. I would say this is probably the first of many such events to come for our clubs. We've been very pleased with the success of this event. The turnout has been fantastic. We've received a lot of favorable comments from the competitors as well as the guests who are here this weekend.
Vintage racing and historic racing incorporates cars made back in the 30s and 40s and 50s up through the 60s. What does it take, John, to get into vintage racing?
Well, basically, we've got a lot of people who used to race old cars when they were new, and they've decided that they'd like to do it again, perhaps in a much less competitive situation. And that's what we're really doing. We're not really trying to promote winning races and going out there and having the fastest lap time. Really, there are no losers in vintage racing, and that has a broad appeal, not only to former race car drivers, but also to young people who have maybe just bought their first sports car, and maybe they're not so young, but the sports cars are rather old, and they finally discovered our movement. We're a very small part of the old car hobby, and overall, we are offering them an opportunity to use their cars in the way in which they were originally meant to be used. And this is really the heart and soul of what we're doing here this weekend. By the way, I might mention being an inaugural always has a certain degree of excitement attached to it. This is our first event. We've had an enormous support for our efforts here this weekend from not only the participants, but also from the racing staff. We've got many very professional SCCA people here in timing and scoring. And the event is beautifully run as though this was a professional race weekend, which of course it isn't. We're strictly amateurs. We also have several sponsors who have made all of this possible. In no particular order, I'd like to mention a couple of them, if I may. Chuck Maranto from True Value in Chicago. George Brugenthies from Lincoln Mall Bakery, also in Chicago. Jerry Schultz from Sterling Systems. Daryl Newell from Micro Research. The Cruise people from ITT Cruise Auctions, and they've just been superb. Oh, also we've had Aztec Publishing, who were kind enough to send us Rene Dreyfus for the weekend, and Rene has just been a superb addition to this event. He's a former Grand Prix driver, champion of France. As a matter of fact, there he goes right now with Mr. Lee Hall. They're about to have Rene on a personally conducted tour of the course. Rene was born in France, of course, and raced for Bugattis and many of the fantastic cars of the 30s, and retired some time ago. He's been in the United States since about 1940 when he came over to race in Indianapolis, and because of the fall of France, he never quite made it back, at least not on a permanent basis. So he's kind of one of us. And we're just absolutely thrilled that he's here this weekend.
Thank you very much for the history, John. It's a perfect day for vintage racing. Have fun.
Thank you.
Well, he told me he wouldn't land till 2:22 or something. Did I hear your car running a bit ragged there near the end?
That's qualifying for groups number 1 and 2. Qualifying for groups 1 and 2.
My name is Ben Rose.
69.
And this is my brother,
Irv Rose.
and this is our guest of honor.
I am Ronnie Dreyfus.
Yes, Irv and I are co-owners of this car, and it's a 1927 T35B Grand Prix Bugatti. And we've owned it for about 3 years. Been completely restored in England by Crothwaite and Gardner, who are probably #1 restorers of Bugattis in the world. It originally belonged to Mademoiselle Helle Nice.
Yeah, Mademoiselle Helle Nice.
And I'd like to ask Rene, maybe he could tell us a little bit about Mademoiselle Helle Nice, because we know very little about her.
I remember that she was a beautiful woman. She was an actress. She was a beautiful woman, and she did drive officially for Bugatti.
Oh, she
owned the car that she raced with. And I think she raced a few years with the Bugatti. And then she had, if my memory is good, an accident in Argentina. And since that accident, she decided not to race anymore. But she was a beautiful woman. She was settled in the number 2 or 3 in Europe. And you remember who was #1? It's Czech Elizabeth Tionek, Czech lady who is now 85. And she drove beautifully and beat with a car like this a lot of better men driver, but she beat them all. At the Targa Florio in Sicily in 1928, where I was myself. He started in 1930, and I won with exactly the same car, the Monaco Grand Prix in 1930. That's 56 years ago. And I'm so happy to be in your car now. That brings back so many good memories. And you have a perfect looking car. I'm trying to find out if there is anything wrong that you did in rebuilding it. But there is nothing wrong. It's absolutely perfect. And I congratulate you to keep it in so beautiful shape.
We're here with Bob Woodward, and Bob has one of the very rare cars that you see at the vintage and historic races. This is called a OSCA Maserati. Bob, would you tell us about the car, please?
Be happy to. This OSCA, which was built by the Maserati brothers in 1954, is called an MT4. It's a 4-cylinder engine with twin overhead camshafts. It has a displacement of 1450 cubic centimeters and is distinguished by virtue of the fact that it has no head gasket, the head being hand-lapped to the block. It's a very reliable engine. These engines run many races before they need an overhaul. The car's body was built by a man named Frua, and he was one of the special body or coach builders in Italy back in the days when the Maseratis and the Ferrari people were having their coach work farmed out. Now, the thing that's interesting about this car is that, or this model, is that an identical car to this, owned by Briggs Cunningham and driven by Sterling Moss, won the 12-hour endurance race at Sebring in 1954. And that was against some rather large-bore machinery represented by the likes of Aston Martin, Jaguar, Ferrari, Maserati, and other specialty cars. So these little machines, oftentimes in long road races, would come up, if not a winner, at least up near the front, simply by virtue of the fact that they were so solid and virtually unbreakable. I bought this car about a year and a half ago out of an estate sale in Toledo, Ohio. It had been originally restored by Peter Magnuson, who resides out in Connecticut, and he's a specialty builder that works principally on OSCAs. And the car had been in storage for about 8 years, so I took it back to Peter Magnuson, and he brought it up to correct specs and redid it so that it's now in its full restored state. I've raced it twice, once at Lime Rock, Connecticut, and of course this weekend. I first came here to Road America, interestingly enough, in 1959, and in those days I was racing with the SCCA and had a Cooper 500 powered by a JAP engine. And I raced here in the early 60s and then got completely out of racing, rejoined it when I discovered this thing called vintage racing.
Yeah, that's great. Bob, have a good day. Enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.
My pleasure indeed.
right, hi, I'm Bob White, and this happens to be my 906, which is a 1965. It was Porsche's 1965 mainline type race car. They ran the first ones at Sebring, and they built 65 of these. There were 52 carbureted ones, 9 fuel-injected ones, and 4 with 8-cylinder engines, actually. And this one happens to have one of the fuel-injected engines in it. It's a little under 2 liters, 1,996 cc's, and runs about between 220 and 230 horsepower, which means that it's a pretty hard-working little engine. You shifted about 8,100 RPM in it. And this is I've been working on it for several years. I finally got it finished about a year or so ago. And we were in Europe last year for 6 months, so I didn't have a chance to drive it. So this is really only the second chance I've had it out since we've redone it. And I still have some adjustments to make. You know, under heavy braking, it's a little skitterish. So I've got to do some adjusting on the brakes and a few things. But I like it real well. The car was bought originally by a man in the Seattle-Tacoma area of Washington. And he raced it on the West Coast for 4 or 5 years. And then a friend of mine, Chuck Stoddard from out in Cleveland, Ohio, was one of the Porsche dealers at one time. Had it for 4 or 5 years, never did anything with it. And I had an opportunity to buy it. And that was 3 or 4 years ago now. And I took it all apart and put it all back together, made sure all the brakes and everything were fine. And now we're out there.